So we've been sharing details of that resignation by the Special Prosecutor Martin Amidu with you. We'll have an extensive conversation with our guests as we break the issues down and also look forward. We've got plenty of questions. There are lots of questions on people's minds. Does this mean that the fight against corruption is over? Who has failed? Is it Martin Amidu or the government? But we want to first of all appreciate how far we have come. But before I bring my colleague Joseph Akable, who will take us through a few of the things related to the Office of the Special Prosecutor, let me say good morning to Dr. Imala Lakweti, Executive Director of IDEC. A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning.
Great. So Joseph Akable is here. He will take us through some of the significant things that have occurred in relation to the Office of the Special Prosecutor within the time that Martin Amidu has occupied the space. Joseph, where do we begin?
Let's begin before, 2017. There was this promise that was made about the fact that, we needed an office that could prosecute corruption in terms of involving politically exposed persons. And so we're supposed to have an independent institution that was going to handle that. Then the president wins the election and goes through the process to have the law passed. The office is set up and an individual is named. A former Attorney General in the NDC administration is named as Ghana's first special prosecutor. He takes office and after a certain period, he begins to speak to the press on a number of issues. One, he says his office has not been appropriately set up. He doesn't have office space. He says he's operating from a 3-bedroom with a 2 boys' quarters. He says he doesn't have staff. He has to rely on staff that are on secondment. He doesn't have the resources to do the recruitment that he ought to do. But the public, knowing very well the individual who had been appointed, someone who on his own got the Supreme Court to agree that some 51.2 million cedis should be returned to the state coffers, is seen as an individual who they trust to do a lot. And so the public still mounts pressure on him to deliver. And he now goes on to try and prosecute a member of parliament. And he gets a case that goes to the Supreme Court challenging his eligibility. It takes a long period. Eventually, the Supreme Court affirms that he's eligible to hold office and allows that case to resume. So that case, there are 2 cases relating to the Boko Central MP that are currently in court. But still, people are not impressed and they are still asking for answers and want more to be done. Contract for sale is done. One has to put out a documentary. A copy is sent to the Special Prosecutor to investigate. Another is sent to Shraj. Shraj issues a report. Then again, people ask, what is Martin Amidu up to? Then he does Agyapa in between all of these happenings. Agyapa, damning verdict on government in terms of some key individuals. One, it alleges that there was bid rigging relating to data banks involvement, which is, we know was founded by the finance minister. It also makes reference to African Legal Associates, which has as its managing partner, Gabi Asaro-Chudakwe, another relative of the president. And so he says it amounts to bid rigging. He says it's opaque and it doesn't help in the fight against corruption. And so he issues a report.
Was this his major piece of work? Because this was a 64-page report that he issued after his risk assessment.
You could put it that way, but for many who are looking at dealing with corruption to an extent that we want it to be dealt with, obviously conviction would have been the best form of success rate. But in terms of what he has been able to do within a period, this is a significant piece of work. Now he does this, and since then various responses come through. One, the presidency issues a letter that says the president had taken note of a response from the Ministry of Finance and same from Martin Amidu and has asked that it goes back to Parliament. Mr. Amidu then releases a statement to say that, look, the finance minister cannot be responding to me because I actually gave him the report on November 2. And I gave it to the presidency on October 16. And so if it's anything, he has not gotten a copy of my letter yet. He cannot be responding to me. But yet he goes on to say that, okay, these are my findings. And now we are told all of a sudden that Mr. Amidu has decided to resign. And his explanation is that, one, he accuses the presidency of interference.
Even before you go to the resignation, and this also just happened on Monday where he also issued a statement telling us about how the staff to his office were on secondment may have been compromised.
Yes, 2 individuals. The first is the lead investigator, and there's also a case officer who he says have been compromised in that in their their investigation of the contract for sale matter, he said they were acting slowly, and he had been told by the Auditor General staff that they had actually said that this is a good case that they could all benefit from. But he said he confronted them, they denied. Then he gave them work to do. They issued a report that if he compares to the evidence that was available, he simply knew that, it appears they are compromising.
Hold your thought there for me, Joseph Akable. Let me bring into the conversation Dr. Emmanuel Akwete. Dr. Akwete, first of all, from the governance point of view, I want to ask, was it a matter of, or let me put it this way, is it true that our governance structure or system, if you like, is in such a way that a person like Martin Amidu was never going to succeed in the first place?
Not necessarily. I think we are fighting to deepen and strengthen our governance institutions. And you need people like Martin Amidu to take the fight on. What has happened, he's taken a very principled position, which is he thought he was doing a professional work. He had already told, it was one of the conditions he gave to the president, that I do not want interference, political interference. And he wants to do his work as best as he could within the law and according to the professional ethics and principles and all that. So in this case, if you look at it carefully, he says, you have interfered in my work in the way that shouldn't, and it undermines his authority. He uses the term non-partisan, or he wanted a non-partisan independence, to explain his positions and to forge ahead and so on. Now, we are having problems with the autonomy and the independence of the institutions. The separation of powers presupposes that parliament, judiciary, executive powers will be separated, but they would also work. There will be checks and balances, and there has to be a way where they converge. The term you use is that they interface. There are moments they have to come together, but after coming together, they have to revert and pursue their own tracks until it becomes necessary to converge. So it's not a complete independence any of them have. Now, when you go to the executive arm, because the OSP is part of the executive arm, we should remember that it was the compromise between the advocacy for separating the Attorney General's department from the Ministry of Justice. In other words, the Minister of Justice should not be boss of the Attorney General's department, and there should be an autonomous or independent prosecution authority, like the Crown Prosecution Agency in the UK. So the compromise then was that there's a special prosecutor, because if you were going to do the latter, you needed a constitutional amendment, you needed some consensus on it from both sides, and it takes time. But there was the urgent need to fix the problem of investigations that would lead to prosecution and to end impunity. Okay, in state office, in the use of public resources, corruption, theft, whatever you call it. So he made his conditions clear in his letter, and the president accepted that. And so in this matter, he's taken a very principled stand. He said, I was doing my work. I'm doing it professionally. I'm the special prosecutor. I've gone through the processes. I've submitted my findings to you. First of all, to invite me to a meeting, was something he didn't take kindly. But he also understood that there could be an interface, because this is a matter affecting the government, and the president is head of the government. Was it to ask further questions on the letter he had served him, or some clarity? But he went to that meeting, and then there was the 2 weeks break, and then there comes another meeting, and the president is presenting responses from the finance minister to the issues to him, which he objected to. And he saw that as clear interference, because he said he served the letter and the report to him, but he also intended to now investigate. And we all know that before the letter came out, or he published it publicly, he had raised issues about the ministry not furnishing him with documents, and which was causing delays. He said it several times. Whether he got it and eventually that led him to publish his report, I'm not too clear. I need to go back to stuff. But at the moment, what we are seeing then is that he is fighting what he considers to be executive interference. It's a case that could be likened to the Auditor General. that says, hey, I'm independent according to the Constitution and the laws under which I'm governed. The question then is, do I come under a board or the president? Or is there a commission, an appointing authority? Or is it parliament? We need to clarify these issues. So the fight going on is a fight about strengthening the institutions of state and their autonomy, operational autonomy and independence to do their work without anybody politically powerful breathing over their neck or whatever. That is what the fight essentially is about, getting state institutions empowered the way they should. And his case is not an isolated one. I mean, the police say the same thing. Why is the police not acting on many things? They tell you that there is heavy political breathing over their neck, and there is some kind of subtle or interference, and they leave the cases in protest, you might say. So this is the point at which I think is a fight he started. He's a courageous position to take. We haven't heard the response of the president yet, whether he's going to accept it and move on. As to how he's been treated so far, the kind of office he's been given the huge nature of the cases, corruption cases he's supposed to tackle, the lack of adequate staff, the secondment. So it all shows the lack of independence. His autonomy, has not been secured and operationally guaranteed in any way. He couldn't recruit his own people. And those who came, he also had issues with. So it's a fight over the autonomy of the office to operate, but also its independence from political interference, and particularly what he considered to be a partisan interference. I think these are, for me, the issues.
So isn't it what plays out at the office of the Attorney General, Ministry of Justice, that's also playing out here with the Office of the Special Prosecutor in terms of the autonomy that you mentioned, the independence from political interference?
I think so long as you come, that is why the debate or the advocacy to separate the positions initially was that the Attorney General, who is also Minister of Justice, is a politician, appointed by the president. He's supposed to be the chief legal advisor of the president. And he belongs to a party. He or she belongs to a party. And in most cases, the institutions have problems dealing with political corruption, people in politics by virtue of their political office, and who have done things that they need to be prosecuted or investigated. And the Attorney General, not this particular one alone, Attorney Generals under the Fourth Republic, and within our authoritarian regimes, these matters have always come up, that there is some selective justice. If you belong to the opposition, then they go all out. But if you're a member of government, of the governing party or whichever group it is, you are shielded. And that this selective justice is in itself injustice, undermines, the integrity of the justice system. So people wanted separation and say, Minister of Justice, you're a politician, we respect you for that. But then focus on being the justice issues and the policies, the criminal justice issues that are coming, what laws needs to be changed, or what resources are required, how many personnel are needed, what strengthening, those kinds of policy matter issues, okay? But leave the prosecution of crime or suspected crime to professionals who have security of tenure and whose recruitment itself is so rigorous. You must have the competence to handle this, and put them in a certain autonomous state as agents of the state, professionals, bureaucrats, technocrats, experts, lawyers, whatever. Just give them that protection so they can do their work without fear or favor. And that has not been done. And that is why the OSP, for me, I saw it as a compromise between the two, given that we couldn't also rush through constitutional amendment for that purpose. And now it's come to this. It's a fight over that principle. It's a fight over the autonomy of state institutions from politicians to enable them do their work without fear or favor. That's the oath they take.
I'm sure you've heard.
He's leading a principled fight. I just hope that it's, Dombelevo, Mr.
The Auditor
Dombelevo's
General.
case, the Auditor General, we had this thing about he asserting the independence of his office. A board, a politically appointed board chair says, no, I supervise you. The matter goes to the presidency, and the president says, oh, you know, the letter said the president has disciplinary control over his office. These are matters to be clarified. These are matters to really, really clarify and begin to define the limit, the remit, the boundaries, the borders of the autonomy of institutions and how they are protected by oversight bodies. So he's taking on a very big fight. And I think the courage to do that is commendable. I don't know what the president, how the president's response is, but I believe that this case following up on the president probably will reflect on the issue. I believe he might want to reconsider whatever position and maybe talk to him and say, look, if that leads to improving the autonomy of the independence of the office, they getting their resources that strengthens financial autonomy is extremely important to any institution that could function in the separation of, in a division of labor and separation of powers context. If you don't have the finances, how are you going to be independent? You know, so maybe this would help us really look at the institution and how its independence and professionalism, operational autonomy is guaranteed, is secured. And how do we go? So it's opened up the subject for conversation. I don't think we should quickly run to see it only in the limited thing of corruption and cover-ups and so on. I don't think it is the case. Okay. The president might explain his position, but I think it's a principled fight. Of the autonomy of the office is important. We must support it. And I think he's providing that leadership. Okay. It would be a pity if we closed the door and said, okay, if you resign, go, and so on. I think the case needs to be looked at. He said he has investigations to do. If it's not allowed, then it makes a case to say, well, maybe this was something done for him to leave the office so that the case is not continued further.
Yeah. Dr. Akwete, I know you'd have to... I know you'd have to leave us, but kindly just hold it for me. Let me bring Mr. Suleiman Abraina, Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Real quick, I'll come back to you, Dr. Akwete. But Mr. Suleiman Abraina, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time here on the AM show. Hello, Mr. Suleiman Abraina, if you can hear me. A very good morning to you. Hello, Suleiman Abraina? I don't think we have him. So, Dr. Akwete, let me come to you. You mentioned the assertion of independence, if you like. I'm sure you've heard some of the criticisms that have come up following his resignation. I wanted to ask if Mr. Amidu chose the easy way out, as some people have criticized him for doing. Could he assess the independence of his office irrespective of the president's interference, as he put it in his resignation letter?
I don't think he's chickened out. I think he's taking a very principled stand. If you read the text carefully, the evidence is adduced and so on. And not many could. You see, some people would just stay in and do the job, which is the problem we see with some of the institutions, for instance, the police. When they've talked about interference, they still remained. You know, and in that case, subsequently, they lack the courage to take the fight on. And they always want to see what direction the political leader is looking, or maybe get the clearance and so on, which compromises the institutions and weakens it. I see this as a very principled, a very important fight. The autonomy of state institutions, all of them have been compromised, one way or the other, because in our system, the overwhelming power of the presidency is open to interpretation, but it depends on who. Many interpret it differently. You know, the president is all in all. I've seen Ghanaians and been in some constitutional amendment conferences during the CRC when they were reviewing their reports before publishing it. I had the privilege of moderating a session, looking at the executive and all that. And I saw a man I don't know, but I think he was MMD, Metropolitan Municipal or something, say, chief executive,
Okay.
or he's a very important person in the NDC who came with this philosophy. We need the president to develop our country and lift us up to whatever levels. He has a vision for that. And there must be no limitations on his power, no, constraints. We must give him free hand to do what he wants. And there were people that says, where's this from? Who said that? The murmurings and so on. He kept quiet, he didn't talk again. Unfortunately, I can't remember his name. But there are people who think that way. But in a democracy, constitutionalism is about limiting executive power. That's what constitutionalism means. It's the rules that govern, not the persons. Who says, this is my position, so I override everything. And it's a struggle. It's never been given on silver platter. The US still, look at President Trump's fight with whether it's impeachment, what rules he breached, what his rights are, and so on. So it's similar to what? But you need leaders like, the citizens vigilante, if I may use that word at this point, to lead it without necessarily meaning. It's not political. I don't see it as political. I don't see it as just stay in and do because of. I think it's in the president's interest, and the president himself has that element. I think when he was advocating the setting up of the office in opposition, some of the conversations we had with him and his statements in part, he thought an institution like the OSP could do the job. So you don't have to separate Attorney General and Minister of Justice. And now we are seeing the operational challenges. Maybe the president has to put his foot down clearly and set up, make sure that the OSP is really an independent institution and it's working in terms or in accordance with the terms of its powers, the law that is governing them, the resources that is an opportunity for the president to support such institutions in the fight against corruption.
So, Dr. Akwete, I want to ask you a straight question. Has government lost the fight against corruption?
If the president accepts the resignation and does nothing, then it can be interpreted as it's lost. Because, look, you had the Auditor General, who was doing a marvelous work. The president himself, in his State of the Nation address, spoke about the billions that he has saved the country. And he was taking on a whole lot. When you talk to audit service people, he was really transforming and head on, taking ministries and ministers, and accountability is what was coming into the system. Then we heard he had leave. Probably they saw him getting sick at some point and he wasn't aware. So they wanted to do good. And he said, no, okay, let me go on my leave, but let me do my work. The support of the president for anti-corruption institutions or those fighting institutions is extremely important because president, commander-in-chief, and his leadership is crucial to fighting corruption. So in this case, I honestly think that if the president said, okay, I accept your resignation and it's okay, we'll move on and so on, then and with Mr. Domelovo, sitting home, and with the board chair of the audit service having a seemingly free hand, investigating him and all that, then people would conclude that we've lost it. The government has lost it.
Dr. Akwete, just still stay with me. Mr. Suleiman Abrahima is back, and I promise you it will be the last question that I would ask you before you run off. Mr. Suleiman Abrahima, very good morning to you. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning and thanks for having me.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time. So we wanted an independent prosecutor. Mr. Martin Amidu says, I am not being allowed to do my work. Is this the end of the office?
Well, I think the office would continue to exist. What I think is going to happen is that it will take such a lot of work to build any trust and credibility around the office. Of course, there are people who can be appointed, people who are qualified, who can be appointed to the position even today if the president chooses to do that. But it's about, would people have confidence first of all, in the office, and would people have confidence in whoever is appointed? And so I think for the office, it will continue to exist because there is a law backing it. So in name, we would continue to have the office of the special prosecutor. In law, we would continue to have it until such a time that the law is repealed. But in terms of having an office that would really deliver the mandate that we all hoped that we would see it delivering, I think that is where the problem is going to be.
The Media Foundation for West Africa is also involved. I mean, you've been speaking on the matter of the Auditor General. So with that in mind, is it an issue, and I'm asking about the fight against corruption, is it an issue of if you can't beat them, join them at this point?
Well, I think people have said what is happening to our fight against corruption. And my point has always been that there hasn't been any fight against corruption. What has been happening is just, word of mouth and everybody indicating, well, we are interested in fighting corruption. But in terms of the real fight against corruption, nothing like that has happened. Of course, we are all witnesses to the looting that has always happened under this government, under the previous government. People who had never had any record of working all of a sudden gets to be associated with the government, and they acquire property, they acquire, all the monies you can think of. Ministers who just were appointed and have buildings all over, have properties all over, and so on. We are all witnesses to the case involving the former PPA boss, and how much we are told is in his account, the monies that have been transacted. And if you look at the report that was released by Martin Amidu, and you look at the month-on-month volumes of money that was going into the volumes of money that were going into the account, sometimes 400,000, 500,000. How much is the person's salary? And of course, if he's doing any business, how much is that business bringing in? So I don't think that there has been anything like fighting against corruption, not under this regime, not under the previous regime. And it's so disappointing because a lot of us had thought that, well, at least we could move on. We could at least begin to crack the whip. And that is why we all celebrated when Martin Amidu was appointed. I believe at the time, maybe the president still had that early stage energy, early stage determination to do it. And maybe only got to realize that, hey, things cannot be as I had anticipated. And so the obstructions and the impediments were put in place. And I am happy that Mr. Martin Amidu has acted to save his image and reputation. It takes a lot to build the image and reputation that Martin Amidu has, the integrity that he has. And it would have been so sad for him to allow himself to be used, the reputation that he has acquired, for any group to use it for public validation. And then at the end of the day, that reputation, that integrity gets decimated. I mean, what at all is he looking for at this stage? I don't think that Martin will be looking for money, will be looking for property, will be looking for whatever at this stage. The only thing he has is his reputation and integrity.
Yeah, but Mr. Suleiman Abrahima, some persons have said that it was a matter of he could not perform. He's simply justifying his reasoning for his non-performance by the actions that he's taken.
Well, it depends on who says that. I know Mr. Martin Amidu. I trust everything he has said. As I have said, what is he looking for? Is it the salary? Is it, an office space to work from? Is it that he wants to now build a new house? Or this is the time that he wants to join the looting that, has been associated with our public office holders, or what? And so, I mean, you are sitting there in the studio hosting this program on television. Imagine Constitution employs you and gives you no studio, gives you no microphone, gives you no lapel, gives you no camera, and then says, deliver. How are you going to deliver? Imagine, even if these things are there, the logistics you need to move, you don't have it. How are you going to deliver? And then in the end, when you come out to say, look, I am not being allowed to deliver, and people say, well, you are just finding excuses, I don't think that would be right. And I think that anybody who is honest, anybody who has integrity, would know that Martin would not lie for the sake of not being able to perform the job that he was given. It is the same Martin Amidu who was independently fighting in court, the same Martin Amidu who secured the judgment against Wyoming when he was not a public employee, when he was not employed. So why would he get this position and now decide that I'm going to sit down and relax, I'm not going to work, so that in the end, I'll only come out and give excuses in order to resign? I think those who say that are just people who want to, for one reason or the other, do a cover-up or some crisis communication thing to salvage, whatever damage that has been caused by Martin's resignation.
Mr. Suleiman Abraham, just hang in there for me. Dr. Akwete, let me end with you and ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Suleiman Abraham. Is this the end of the office of the special prosecutor?
It will be the end if Martin goes. I haven't.
Isn't he gone? Do you foresee a comeback?
Listen, sometimes you tender resignation. It's the prerogative of the president to say, I accept or I don't. Or it opens a door to a conversation, okay, and the issues that need to be addressed. I think we need fighters, we need leaders like Martin Amidu to help us recoup the autonomy, the operational strength of state institutions, the independence, and the limitations of the powers of our presidents and our ministers. The police, as I've said, is a classic example. The police that can't act against political violence and so on, and everybody wonders and so on. So it's a total loss because, you see, he embodies the spirit of the office. He came as citizen vigilante, single-handedly, the sort of things he did. The Woyome case, as Suleiman has referred to, and many others. And he's known. He's been Attorney General who resigned and took on a fight against his own colleagues in cabinet. Okay, so with that track record, and he's been very consistent with that. So when the president decided to go for him, the message he sent clearly was that this is the man who would shape the institution, who would grow it, okay, and who would give it the image he needs. Those qualities. It's human beings that shape institutions. That's why they're leaders. And in that case, it emboldens the staff and it gives it a particular image and integrity. When you do not have leaders who can build institutions that way and stand up against authority and even prove to the highest office holder in the land that you're wrong on this, or say, he wrote his letter with a lot of respect and courtesies and so on. But he was still making the point that this is wrong. It is not acceptable. And the president is also a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer and all that. So he's opened, it's a fight. I think if the president says, okay, I accept your resignation and I am appointing somebody, it's fatal to the integrity and strength of the office. That is what we are faced with now. It signals, the collapse of the institute or the death of it spiritually, because you need somebody with a certain quality to build the institution. Institutions are built by human beings who are principled, who have the courage to face the powerful, and who prevail or are allowed or supported. You need such strong institutions, and it will be built by leaders, human beings. So he's one of such. If we say he should go, we've set a very bad precedent, because whoever is appointed after him will say, Ghanaians will tell him, remember what happened to Martin Amidu. So be careful. And in this country, you're always told to be careful. Gentle, don't step on toes and so on and so. So it's fatal to what the OSB stood for or was established to stand for. It is a serious situation. I just hope that the president would have a chart or rescind his decision or decide to look at how this whole office, which indeed could be one of his legacies, an important thing that in the fight against corruption, and OSB was established under his authority. The fight had to happen, but it shouldn't be fatal. It shouldn't destroy that institution. I think Amidu's exit could destroy that. Yeah. And we are back to square one.
Just before you go, Mr. Ndebrugiri, who is himself a lawyer and sometime back an MP, says that this office was not even meant to function in the first place. This was just something that...
you could see it that way in the cynicism. And I think that, you see, if you take the OSP in isolation, you wouldn't fully appreciate what he's saying. Here we have independent institutions, and they are being undermined, and it comes mostly from executive power. the institutions within the executive realm, even those independent of that, they say, hey, I decide on how much money you get. I would appoint people not according to a set criteria or those who are seen to be loyal and so on. This was an exception. And that is why it's a standard bearer. So, yes, it wasn't supposed to. It's a cynical view. But I also think that for those who were advocating for a strong state institution that could fight corruption and needed a human being, an individual with the right credentials and courage and strength and integrity to stand and shape it up with the competence to do that, it's a sad commentary that he never got the resources. He had limited number of seconded, he couldn't choose his own prosecutors. He never had the money. He said his emoluments have not been paid fully, and so on. So it raises the question whether truly was the president aware, and if so, why didn't he respond to them earlier? So there are many ways in which you are likely to agree with the cynics.
Okay. Well,
I think that it's a fight in every situation. Just like we fought for independence, institutions must have leaders who would fight the cause to change, to bring the changes we need. It will not happen on a silver platter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emmanuel Akwete. Mr. Suleiman Abrahima, so big question, who can do what Martin Amidu could not do?
Well, at this stage, I really, I don't have anyone in mind. I have said before that if it comes to corruption, the two people that I trusted, Martin Amidu, Mr. Domelevo, at least they demonstrated through their performance, through their track record, before assuming office and after assuming office, that indeed they stand for the good of this country and they stand strongly in that battle against corruption. But unfortunately, we at this stage have both men out, and I sincerely appreciate Dr. Akwete's point about the possibility of Martin returning, but that is really something that I see as an impossibility. I don't think it will happen, and that is why at this stage I really don't know if the office of the special prosecutor would ever exist to do the work that we were told it was created to do. It all comes out to, I think, the kind of constitution we have and the fact that the president controls everything. It takes a president who says, look, this is what I want to do. It doesn't matter who is affected. Once you commit a crime, crime is crime. Once you engage in a corrupt act, well, the law will come after you. I wouldn't be bothered. But from Martin's resignation letter and previous lamentations, it is clear that he wasn't getting that support that he needed to be able to deliver. And as I said, how do you get work done if you don't have the logistics, if you don't have the necessary tools to be able to deliver? And for me, as I keep saying, what I'm happy about is that I would have been one of the people who would be very sad if Martin had allowed himself to be used and have his image decimated at the end of the day without anything. I mean, just sacrifice the years of hard work, the years of integrity, the years of whatever he has done, for which reason he doesn't own those mansions that these young and old politicians own, for which reason he doesn't own any of these plush properties that people who recently got into power are having, and those who were in power before have had. And why would you then allow yourself to be treated the way he was being treated, for everybody then to be insulted? But the last thing that I would want to say is that whilst we talk about Martin Amidu and the Special Prosecutor's Office, I think that it is important we also look at the board of the Special Prosecutor's the Special Prosecutor. What has been their role? If Martin was lamenting, if Martin was not getting what he needed to work, that is why a board exists. We are told now that it is the Audit Service Board, which I don't even think has the legal mandate to be acting the way they are acting. That caused Mr. Domelevo's whatever and, now constituted or authorized for an audit to be conducted and so on and so forth. So in the midst of all this, what has been the role of the Special Prosecutor's Board? And the board is chaired by my good friend, my sister, who is heading the Ghana Integrity Initiative. Mm-hmm. And in all this, I think that we should also be asking them questions.
They are not talking.
What has been their role?
They are not talking. We've tried to get some response, and Linda is not speaking.
We shouldn't allow them to say we are simply not talking. I think we should push them to talk. That is the body that was having oversight over, even though, yes, the special prosecutor in exercising his mandate would not come under the control and direction of any entity, but the board was there for a purpose. And if anything at all, that is the overarching body, that is the advisory group, that offers strategic direction, and so on and so forth. So if the institution or the person, the occupant of the position was lamenting, the resources are not coming, I'm not getting what is needed, and so on and so forth, what did the board do all the way till now? I think we must hear from them. Not talking would mean that they are either joining the other side and not being on the side of the purpose for which they were appointed. I think that my friend Linda and colleagues, we must hear from them.
Mr. Suleiman Ibrahim, very thank you. Thank you so much for making time. Thank you for helping us with this conversation. He's Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. My colleague Joseph Akable is still with me here. Some of the significant cases that the Special Prosecutor was handling. There's the matter of the Mahama Yariga that you mentioned, which is in court.
Two of them, actually. One relates to tax evasion, how he imported some vehicles into the country. The other has to do with an ambulance he bought for an assembly in his constituency, which the Special Prosecutor says he branded as though it was a donation from him and his personal funds. And so those are the two issues that are still in court in terms of matters he has been able to take to that level. We know that he was investigating the Shraj contract for sale issue as well. And so
the corruption aspect of it. But that's the one that he also mentions that the staff that were working on it had been compromised, apparently.
Yeah. But it's important, there's this provision here, section 13(8) of the Office of Special Prosecutor Act. It says, where the office of the Special Prosecutor becomes vacant, the President shall within 6 months appoint a person qualified for appointment to that position. It goes on to say that for the purposes of this requirement, vacancy includes resignation, death, or vacation of post. And it's important to note that the law doesn't make any reference about whether when there's a resignation it has to be accepted or not accepted. It only says that this vacancy applies to resignation as well. And so we know he has tendered in a resignation. I don't know whether the president ought to accept it before he goes. We've not seen a situation, as Dr. Buzia said in the Salah case, that an employer cannot force an employee who doesn't want to work. I mean, if he says he's resigned, he's resigned. I mean, unless you can at best negotiate with him and speak to him to try and get him to revert. He had a non-renewable 7-year term. He's just done about 3 of that, and
less than 3 actually.
Less than 3 actually.
Yes,
so
I think about 2 years, 8 months.
I see.
Yeah. Okay, but just to also clarify, we haven't heard from government?
No, we are told that a response will come from government, and will specifically address the issues. The main issue that is of contention now is the accusation that President Akufo-Addo interfered with the work of Martin Amidu in telling him to hold on with his investigation in terms of putting out the corruption risk assessment report for at least a week. And the SP says, then he informed the president that I cannot continue with my work because you are interfering with my independence. But the other question to ask is that the legal framework which was set up for him, this comment from the presidency, was there any legal basis for him to have been obstructed? That is a question that we obviously have to ask, because we gave him the backing to ensure that that communication would just have been a comment from the presidency and would not have affected. He issued the report and put it out there anyways. And so that wouldn't have been something that has affected his work. But all those are matters that Mr. Amidu has taken a decision that this is someone I trusted and he has done this. So I want to step aside, but we'll wait to hear from the presidency.
Well, this is your election headquarters. Trust that we'll keep you updated when there are new developments on this matter.